For those who are completely ignoring you, well, then it may be time to go in hard and go in fast to make sure that you get paid.
Hi, welcome to Coffee with Confio. I'm William Freitas, and today's topic is staying in business, especially given the impact that the coronavirus has had on small businesses. Today we've got Hector Menendez. Hector is from H&A Legal, he's a director there, and H&A Legal specialise in commercial legal advice to small to medium enterprises, and they're really passionate about helping small businesses, making sure they understand what contracts they're entering into and what their legal considerations are to make sure that they succeed. And so Hector, it's great to have you on the show.
Thanks, Will. Thanks for having me.
We're excited to talk to you specifically about the impacts that some businesses have been suffering, I guess, from the coronavirus, which is quite big. We've had Angelo talk to us about some cash flow issues. We've had Esther talk to us about some HR policy issues, but we really want to delve into some of the legal issues. And that's why we've got you on the show today, so we're excited to have you. Now, we've been hearing from a number of businesses where their revenue's been impacted. Just yesterday I'd heard from a gym where they had half of their members cancel in the last week. That's half of their revenue that's gone.
Yeah.
Now that's pretty significant. Over 50%. Like it's absolutely mind-boggling, and businesses of all different industries are suffering. And it's getting to a point now where businesses are starting to close. And this is a real thing, and we want to provide as much value to small
businesses
out there to survive, because we know small business makes up 90% of the economy.
Definitely.
So outside of the government stimulus, that ScoMo has come out and given us close to 200 billion, great. But that's going to help us in April and July.
Yeah.
What's going to help us now? Give us a couple of tips that people can focus on, because obviously their revenue is reducing significantly, but their expenses are still there. What are some of the things they can focus on right now?
There are a few things that they can do at the moment, namely looking at all their service agreements with their suppliers. Firstly, looking at whether or not there are terms in there that allow them to suspend or cancel those services, or alternatively renegotiating the terms of a repayment plan or the terms of the contract itself. The good thing is that there appears to be an attitude from the large corporates of giving some leniency to small and medium-sized businesses who are struggling at the moment. So I think there is a great opportunity to renegotiate those contracts, reduce your costs, and then extend your cash flow runway.
Yeah, perfect. And obviously buying power right now, well, not so much buying power, but your negotiation position is quite good, right? We're seeing a lot of clients approach different providers, whether it's electricity, internet, phone. What is it that providers can do to help with cash flow? What would you say from a negotiation perspective is now a great time?
Now's probably the best time to renegotiate all your contracts. So what I'd recommend businesses do is look at their list of suppliers and go through them line by line and give them a call. Tell them what you're experiencing and see what you can, how you can renegotiate the terms of that agreement. A lot. We're all in this together ultimately, and so every business has to extend some leniency in order to get through it. So I think there is a great opportunity now to renegotiate contracts with your suppliers, and I think you need to be doing that sooner rather than later, so that you're not in a position where that cash flow dries up sooner.
And what are some of the legal implications? Are there some specific clauses within there that businesses need to be careful with? Are they limited in what they can do, or is, from a legal standpoint, what are their implications?
So there are some technical legal clauses in contracts, which I won't go into too much detail. They're called force majeure clauses, but
they'll charge you for the advice. Kidding.
Those clauses in contracts basically allow a party to walk away from the contract in the event that it can no longer be performed. So you might want to look out for these, what they call force majeure clauses in contracts, or just general clauses that suggest that if the contract can't be performed, well then a party may be entitled to walk away. Now, you have to look at the express words used in the contract. So there's nothing that is implied into these contracts, but looking at the details of each of those agreements is probably the first step that you should take.
And without going into too much detail of the force majeure clauses and so on, what are some of the elements that, or some of the areas that businesses can particularly focus on? We're looking at landlords in particular.
Yeah.
Lease is a big expense for a lot of these businesses. Would you find some of these clauses within a tenancy agreement?
Definitely. In most commercial contracts, these clauses are in there. The question then becomes whether or not it's a 90-day or 60-day force majeure clause.
Right.
So typically they are in all commercial contracts, but the analysis would require looking at the precise wording used in that contract.
Right.
And whether or not the definition extends to the term pandemic, because
right.
After the outbreak of swine flu,
SARS, yeah.
and SARS, many of those clauses were changed to include the word pandemic, but not all of them. So you need to look at those specific words in the contract.
And I think you mentioned timing perfectly, because we don't know how long this is going to go for, right? We're in an impending lockdown, and it could go for 1 month, 2 months, 6 months. It could be a long time, especially economically, for businesses to respond. So I think it's perfect. Have a look at all those contracts and review that. But we've gone through managing, I guess, how they can look at their expenses. But some businesses, as much as they don't want to, they've got employees that they can't afford and they have to lay them off. They've worked with these people for years, they've nurtured them, they've taught them how to run the business or do what they do successfully. But unfortunately, especially restaurants, guys, support small business, support restaurants whenever you can, wherever you can. They are doing takeaways, which is great. But the fact is, reduced income means they have to get rid of some staff. What is it that small business can do to lay off staff legally?
So the first step is to look at the terms of any specific employment contract that you have with the employee. Many small businesses simply don't have employment contracts, so the next step is to look at what the legislation says about it. There is provision under the Fair Work Act to stand down an employee for a period. Alternatively, you could make them redundant, but obviously that may require payment. If you're a business under 15 people, then there is no redundancy entitlement. But I think, does that answer your question, Will?
Yeah, look, it does. It definitely does, and it's something that people want to avoid, getting rid of employees. But you want to have the confidence too, as a small business, that you do whatever it takes, really. And work with your employees too. It might just be a small portion of time, but if there's no money coming in the door, you can't be paying your employees. So
it's a good point.
Number one is looking after the business, because the business looks after your employees. It's that thought of number one is look after your employees because they look after your clients. But if your clients aren't coming in the door, look after the business, but work with your employees to make sure that there's a plan. I think that's the key element as well.
Yeah, and look, I think the best thing is communication. We're really moving into a period of obvious uncertainty, and much of the law is based on precedent. And because this is unprecedented, we don't have the laws that I suppose deal with this precise situation. And I'm sure government will move quickly to implement some laws, but the reality is you need to be protecting your business first and foremost, and do whatever you got to do in order to protect that business, because if you can protect that business, you're also protecting in an indirect way your employees and the prospect of them returning to work. So it's really important, and there is going to be some grey area in what you do. So then as a matter of practicality, you may have to do what you have to do in order to keep your business going, and there will be some grey area in whether or not that is legal to the precise letter of the law or not.
It's an interesting debacle, I guess, because I presume the court system is going to have to deal with issues that are, like you said, unprecedented. We're in uncharted waters. So I guess that'll progress over the next 6 to 12 months, and then we'll see how things track. But talk to me about, particularly around uncollected debts. Specifically, we're getting phone calls from clients saying that their clients are closing the doors and they've got $60,000, $100,000 owing to them, large sums of money. Now, we had Angelo in episode 7 talk to us about cash flow. Check out that episode if you want to have a look at particularly payment terms and seeing if you can get payment up front before you do the service, which definitely helps with that. But let's say there is some money outstanding. What are some of the things that businesses can do to get that money back? What is the process?
Yeah, look, I mean, there is a bit of an ethical dilemma. We're all in a difficult position, and how hard do you press for a debt in these situations? Where your client or customer may be struggling themselves. So I think what you need to do is look at your list of debtors and break them up into people who are communicating with you openly, and people that are not communicating with you openly. For those who are speaking to you and telling you that they intend to pay you and they may pay you over time, well then you might take a different attitude, a different approach to those people. For those who are completely ignoring you, well then it may be time to go in hard and go in fast to make sure that you get paid. They're the things that we're dealing with at the moment. And I think there is an ethical dilemma as to how hard you press, but I think you'd be able to gauge that by how much that person is communicating with you. If they've been upfront and they're looking to work with you, well then I think in those circumstances you might want to extend some leniency. But where people are completely ignoring you, then you may need to take some more assertive action.
And that might mean litigation or
that
something.
That might be sending a letter of demand or commencing a process in court at the last resort. But this is where we're at.
See, I love that because it's not always litigation. It's advice about how you can work with that particular debtor, right? Like you rightfully said, we've heard plenty of situations where you've been dealing with a client for 8 years and they are going through a rough patch right now too. And you want to do as much as you can to support them because we're all going to come out on the other side. And the more we can support each other in this process, the stronger we're going to come out as a community.
Definitely, yeah.
And if you want to really look after your suppliers, the best way to do so is to negotiate and discuss on debtors and how you can work together on that. So I think that's a prime example. But let's say, for example, they were to go into litigation. What's the process that businesses need to consider?
Yeah, so typically the process looks like this. We send a letter of demand to that person, usually give them 7 days. Maybe in this marketplace you'd give them 3 days. If they don't comply and pay the bill, then you might want to commence a process in court. We can do that all online, so it doesn't require attending court. If they don't pay that amount within 28 days from the date of filing, then they are in default. So at that point, you could get a default judgment against them, and that gives you different rights like garnishing bank accounts, examination, which you're probably not going to use in this marketplace, but it gives you some other rights, and then you can take certain debt recovery processes from there on in.
And this is probably slightly off topic in a way, but relevant in the sense that the government's recently came out and said that they're going to be a little bit more lenient towards insolvency laws.
Yes.
So Australia has one of the most stringent insolvency laws in the world, where it means directors of all business sizes can be deemed personally liable for running a company whilst insolvent. Now, the government's saying they're going to be a bit lenient about that.
Yeah.
Doesn't really work with our legal system in that way. So like you said, unprecedented again. But we might find businesses taking that extra step, pushing themselves further into insolvency to try and get themselves out.
Yeah.
Which will mean a lot of these small businesses out there will have invoices outstanding to them. So I think it's super important to know what your I guess, obligations are and what you're entitled to. Have a look at episode 7 again, where we talk about payment terms. You and I have spoken about payment terms, about if you're doing it on 60 days, bring it back to 30 or not even, make sure you get that money up front before you do the service, because you might not get that money. I think that's all very sound advice.
Yeah, look, I mean, the insolvency situation is pretty stark at the moment. Like, you've had a bunch of restaurants and pubs and clubs close. Yep. They've obviously got liabilities, and they've got no prospect of earning income for what looks like to be a period of 6 months at the moment. So technically, every single one of those businesses, on the technical definition, may be insolvent at the moment. So, I mean, there will be some re-engineering of that. The question is, when will that come into effect? They've got to pass the legislation, they've got to look at it and think about it, and that's not going to happen in the near future, or not in the next couple of months anyway. So, like I said, I think as a very practical measure, I think businesses should do what they can, whatever they can at the moment, to preserve that cash flow and preserve the business that they have. So there is a prospect, there is a future at the end of the day for the business, and I think you will receive some support. It makes no sense for every one of these businesses to go into insolvency. So I think you just need to do whatever you can now to protect yourself.
In summary, consider all your options really, and make sure that you're doing all that you can to keep your business alive. Really, it's been a great episode, Hector.
Thank you, Will.
We're in some uncharted waters. It's tough times for all small business. So thank you again for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me.
We can't let you go without the Confio confession. Hopefully it brings some light to the scenario. What's something that nobody knows about you?
Well, my daughter, she's 2 years old, my oldest daughter, and she's got no concept of what's going on, but she wakes up every morning and tells me that I stink. And I tell her that her mum stinks, and she says, "No, mummy's beautiful, you stink." That's my confession.
Oh, classic. That's beautiful. Kids are an awesome blessing, right? So
they are.
I love that. Guys, again, thank you for tuning in to Coffee with Confio. If you have any questions for myself or Hector, please feel free to reach out on any of our social platforms. We'll be happy to answer those, whether it's a specific legal question, whether it's any assistance that you need right now in your business. We're happy to help. We're here to help small business. So feel free to reach out. Again, I'm William Freitas, and thank you for tuning in to Coffee with Confio.